Go Family Fun wants to know, what all did you use to shine back the gel coat? Grit, wet sandpaper, the compound, the polish? Awesome question. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. When it comes to restoring old gel coat, 20, 30 years old, that's faded, oxidized, any of that, this is something that a lot of people don't realize that you could do on your own boat and bring it back to life with, it does take some labor, but most gel coat, because it's so thick, it will come back. We want to thank our show sponsor also before we get into the content, partsview.com. They are a parts and outboard superstore online where you can get pretty much anything that you need for your outboard or for your boat. They have easy maintenance kits. So those of you that are in the north looking into winterizing your boats and putting them away for the season, you can get everything that you need to service that engine, their Mercruiser or your outboard Yamaha Mercury, and anything else that you could need for the boat. Check them out. You can get a discount of up to $50 right now using the link in the coupon codes in our description below. Now, when it comes to the restoration of your gel coat or getting it to shine back, gel coat is very thick. It's very porous, so it sucks stuff in. So if you leave it, like being a boat, it's in a wet environment. If you leave it outside, it'll, UV rays will basically kill the gel coat and it'll become white, oxidized, chalky, and it will lose its color. But the good thing about gel coat is because it is so thick, well, also, if it's in a wet environment, it will mold. So it'll get moisture in there and it'll suck that into the pores, which will make it change colors, and it'll get that mold all over the boat, which is actually really easy to get off of the boat. You just need to wash it. And then to get that shine back, as long as there wasn't a problem with the dye that was used in the gel coat, so gel coat's going to be white with a dye in it to get the colors. Most boats have all kinds of different colors: red, blue, white, off-white, black, yellow, whatever. They've got a dye that gives it that color. And as long as there wasn't a problem with that dye, most gel coat can be restored back. And you basically need to, first of all, you need to start with a cleaning. Pressure wash it, use bleach, use soap, use whatever you can use to get the stains and to get all the dirt out and off of the boat. So pressure wash all the mold off, use bleach to get all the stuff off, use a on-off rust remover or something to get stains. Like if you have a bunch of leaves in the boat, certain trees will have like a sap to them that will leave this brown stain on the boat, and you're going to want to get all that off before you start working it. But once you get it cleaned, you just take wet sandpaper. I like to use 3M's wet dry 1000 grit. So 1000 grit sandpaper, get some soapy water, or you can just use water. Doesn't really matter. If you use an orbital sander, that makes it a way quicker. If you just use, an orbital sander with a 6-inch sandpaper at 1000 grit, I use the ones that don't have holes in them. I find that's just a little bit easier, but that's going to make it go quicker. But you just sand it off and you'll know, as you sand it, you'll see the shine coming back to the gel coat, and all the dirt and all the other stuff or the off coloring, you're going to be sanding all that off. Make sure that the gel coat isn't too thin, because there are some boats that if it was a cheaper boat or whatever, when it was built, if the gel coat was really thin, you can go through that and get to fiberglass, which is going to discolor everything. But for the most part, a light wet sand, you'll see and get the feel of it really, really quickly. Once you do that wet sand, then what I like to use is a Presta Super Cut compound, which is a cutting compound, and you just put that on a polisher, whether that be DeWalt, Makita, Milwaukee. It's a polisher. So get yourself a polisher. I'll put some links in the description below for stuff that I have and what I'm using, but you're going to polish it with that cutting compound, and that cutting compound is going to really start to restore the shine of the gel coat. It gets, all the imperfections, that all the sandpaper marks that you put into the boat, it's going to get those sandpaper marks out of the boat and then give it that kind of a shine. Then we go on to, I like to use the 3M One Step, which is a polish wax together, and that you're going to just polish over that now, and that's going to really start to bring the shine out of the boat. And then after you do that, you can wax the boat, and now all of a sudden, boom, you're going to have a glossy, shiny, clean finish. For the most part, most boats, you're going to be able to get them to shine back without having to, paint it or wrap it or something like that, unless there is a problem with the gel coat being like the dye or something like that, where it changes colors or it's thin in one place. For the most part, a wet sand, a compound, and a polish is going to make the boat look brand spanking new. So that's kind of the process, and that's kind of the products that we use. So hopefully that helps you in understanding, what it is. It's a really simple process. It's just very laborious. It takes it's that sweat equity. It takes a lot of work to do, and it'll take a lot out of you. Jibber Jabber says how much you charge to do a job this size, just as a general range of cost for labor. So he's asking about doing a transom. I don't really do transoms. I'm not a fiberglass guy. I do my own boats. So I like to buy boats and do them myself. They're probably not as difficult as a lot of people think they are. They're just time consuming, and having a place to do them, that's the biggest thing with doing them. But as far as what you're going to charge for a transom, they're going to range vastly based on the boat, because every boat's different. Like an inboard boat, most of those transoms have to be done from the inside, not from the outside. There are other types of boats that you want to do them from the inside, and then that's a big process there, because everything in the back of the boat's got to come out of the boat. All the through holes, the transducers, all the lights, all the rigging, the engine's got to come out. If it's an outboard, most of them you can do from the outside. But if it's got a bracket on that, that's all got to come off. Your price range is going to vary a lot based on the boat you're trying to do and how much work it's going to be to do it. I would say in general, it's going to take someone a week to 2 weeks to do. So 40 hours, maybe 80 hours. That's going to be a general range of time. It's a big amount of time, but I'd say somewhere in there is going to be a pretty normal range. So anywhere from maybe $6,000 to $15,000. I mean, it's going to be a wide range just because every boat's going to be different, but that's the best that I can give you as far as a general range of costs is 6 to 15, depending on the boat. I mean, if you've got a little 13-foot whaler and you're doing the transom on that and you can do it from the outside, then you're going to be a couple grand in that, because it's not that much work. But if you're trying to do a 28-foot boat with a bracket and twin engines, it's going to be a lot more. So the boat is going to determine how high that cost gets. Cold says Suzuki 140, 11 hours on it. Good batteries, fuel, cranks, but won't start. I'm at a loss. There's not much information there. So if you've got 11 hours on a Suzuki 140, you got good batteries, you got fuel to it, it cranks, but it won't start. You check your lanyard. Is it in gear? Does it have clean power? Like, that's going to be kind of what's going on. Are you missing spark? Do you have a blown fuse? These are like basic tests that you're going to need to look at, because if you've got good batteries and it's turning over, meaning it cranks, and you got good fuel, then you don't have spark. Like, that's where I'm going with that, because that's all an engine really needs. You need air, you need fuel, you need spark, you need compression. Like, it's a combustion engine. So if you got fuel and you got cranking, you're missing spark or you're missing air. Most likely 11 hours on a 140 Suzuki, you got air, you got compression. Most likely you don't have spark, which now we're looking at, is it in gear? Is the lanyard in? Those kinds of things. It's most likely something simple when you've got an 11 hours on a 140. You're missing spark, so that's where I'm going. Dopefish says, tip for the rusted pivot pin. If you think that it might be full of dried up grease, you can push kerosene or thinner through the grease nipple, leave it to dry for 24 hours, and you're good to go. I've never tried that, never heard of that. Great information. I never thought about kerosene. I mean, so the kerosene is basically just softening up your grease. You're talking about the steering, the bracket on an engine. A lot of older engines, 20-year-old engines, Yamaha, Suzuki, stuff like that, they will have a turning issue where the steering bracket, because it never got grease for the life of the engine, the grease will get old, it will get sticky, it will clump up, and it won't allow the engine to turn. So he's saying to put kerosene in there, and that kerosene will basically soften up the old grease to where you'll be able to turn the engine again. So that's a good tip. Never tried it, but hey, if it works, it works. Awesome. Thank you. Zion Mobile says, I have a 2017 Mercury 150 EFI, and after I run it for a certain amount of time, the throttle gets stuck in forward gear. It is so odd. I have to run for 20 or more times on plane before it won't go back into neutral. If I run for 5 to 10 minutes, no issues. Going in and out of forward and neutral. Any thoughts why this is happening? Well, it's 2017, so you're talking a 7-year-old engine. That's not that old. I don't think you're going to be having older engines, Johnson, stuff like that, where it have a high idle and it wouldn't come out of gear. I think you're going to be looking at something mechanical. It sounds like some kind of a mechanical failure, because when you think about something like this where a boat or an outboard stays in gear. So a lot of times people will have something like this where on land, it's fine. If it's sitting still, it's fine. Out of the water, it's fine. But as soon as you put the boat in the water, it becomes a problem. Usually that says that it's a mechanical failure, because now the only thing that you introduce by putting the boat in the water is load by the boat. So now you've got the boat in the water and there's a load on the propeller. So when you put it into forward gear, the prop is now spinning. It's pushing the water, it's pushing water, which is putting force on the outboard and the boat to go forward. So now you've got that force of the engine going forward. Whereas if it's out of the water, you're in neutral, you put it in gear, there's no force on the boat, there's no force on the outboard, so you can go in and out of gear freely. But when you put the boat in the water and all of a sudden it won't come out of gear, generally, that says that it's a mechanical failure somewhere on the shift shaft, the gears in the lower unit, the shift mechanism that is up in the pan of the engine. Something is mechanically not allowing it to come out of gear. And if the only thing that you introduced from putting the boat in the water is load on the engine, then most likely something like, if the engine's like this and you put force on it, it goes into forward, now it's pushing forward like this. Maybe that's jamming the shift shaft, that there's something around the shift shaft that now all of a sudden that's jammed, and it's just happen chance by 20 minutes or so on plane to get it to go back to neutral. That's just, you've tried 20 times to go to neutral and it finally freed up. I'm looking for something mechanical. The shift mechanism, maybe there's something there, a cable, there's a wire, there's, a bolt that got dropped, like something is going on with the shift mechanism and the mechanics of it. That's what I'm looking at. When you've got those kinds of situations, those are my thoughts. D202 says, I am shocked the molded in threaded insert for the pickup didn't just rotate in the tank. Did you pressure test the tank afterwards? So this is talking about the pickup in a poly tank, which is just a fuel tank that's made out of plastic. And big problem, a lot of the inserts and the pickups, cinder, stuff like that, they will mess up. We've talked about this a couple different times. I did not pressure test that one after, but it did fix the problem. Yeah, I mean, using a plastic bonder, rotating your cinder, stuff like that, you're gonna have to use something with a plastic tank. That's just kind of what it is. They can be a pain to mess with, but yeah, I was pretty shocked that it didn't come out either. I mean, that the insert didn't turn, but we got lucky on that one. KLP says the anchor is only a part of this system and the other is the chain. Don't go cheap on the chain and buy a decent amount. The anchor digs into the ground, but the chain delivers friction towards the ground and thereby holds the boat. One would be surprised about how small an anchor one can get away with, but again, don't go cheap and buy a crappy little one for a large boat. So talking about anchoring a boat and keeping it at the sandbar, keep it in a spot. If you're anchoring in a river, at a sandbar or something like that, you put an anchor out the back, put an anchor out the front to lock you in position, because the tide and the current's going to change. But yeah, scope is extremely important. In the chain, you will see a lot of people will cheap out on a chain. So the chain is one of the more important parts of the anchoring system, because that, like he said, your anchor is going to go in the water and it's going to go down to the bottom. It's going to sink no matter what. If you just got a rope on that anchor, the rope is in the boat is going to be pulling the anchor up. It's going to be pulling it up out of the sand, out of the dirt, out of the mud, whatever. It's not going to hold you in position. But the chain with the weight is going to bring that rope down. So if you've got 10, 15 feet of chain, your anchor is going to go down, the boat's going to be going back, but that chain is going to lay down on the floor of wherever you're at, sand, grass, whatever, and that chain's going to go out. So now you've got this much, and the anchor is now digging down in, and so it's not really the way to say it, but it's like almost like the chain is what's holding you there, not really the anchor. It's not really the way you would say that, but you get the idea that chain keeps that rope down, which means as the boat goes up and down in the water, the chain keeps the anchor down into whatever the seafloor is, holding you into position. So the scope, meaning how much chain and line you've let out from the anchor, that's your scope. More chain is better because it keeps that anchor down. Now, you don't need to get 100 feet of chain if you're trying to anchor out in 10 feet of water. Obviously, that doesn't really equate to anything, but yeah, 10, 15 feet is usually a pretty good number of how much chain you're going to need, depending on how deep you're at. I mean, if you're trying to anchor up in 200 feet of water, you're going to need a lot more line, a lot more chain, a lot, bigger anchor, and obviously the bigger the boat, the bigger the anchor. So that's a good topic to talk about, is not cheaping out on the chain for your anchor. P1 says, bought a brand new motor on auction from a company for 2 weeks ago. Haven't even been out on the lake yet, but when it's tilted, there's oil leakage from 2 small holes located in front of the shift shaft. I can't determine if it's gear house oil or not because it feels more lubricant and thinner, but at the same time, it does not smell like motor oil. Could it be gear house oil anyways? I filled oil from the level plug because there was already a bit of oil in it, but not so much. You got a lot going on here, P1. So if you bought engines that were used from auction, they're probably laying on a pallet. They're probably laying on a crate. They might have been on their sides. You need to get those things put on a boat and get them upright and then clean them, because you could be looking at residual oil from when it was on the crate. So, I wouldn't get them on the boat and get them clean before you start chasing something, because most likely it's not gear oil that's leaking. If it was gear oil, you got a problem with your gear case. It's most likely engine oil, and it's most likely residual. One thing I do want to say, though, here is you're talking about you tried to top off your gear lube from the vent. You can't. It's impossible to do that. I mean, I guess if you took a bottle, like a ketchup bottle, filled it with gear oil, and then put it in the vent hole and squirted it in very slowly and let it, air leak out that way, that would be one way. But it's physically, you can't hook something to it, oil in, it doesn't work. It's physically impossible to do that. So you might want to check your gear lube again. I mean, realistically, for how much gear oil costs, for $10-20, you could just fill that gear case and be done with it. But what you would do in order to fill a gear case that you think might be low, you leave the vent in, you take the drain out, and you put your filler into the bottom. Then you take your vent out, and then you pump it up from the bottom. Because if you've got the gear case, it's an encapsulated, there's no vent. It's a sealed system. And if the oil is here and you're coming in from the top, you can't put any oil in it because of this much air. You need that air to be displaced in order to fill the sealed compartment, being your gear case. So you have to fill it from the bottom. You cannot fill it from the top. It just won't work. So you might want to check that back a little bit. I guess if you think that there's this much air in the top of it and you took a ketchup bottle and you're squirting it in there to where as the oil goes in, air can come out, it's going to take you a long time, and you're probably going to drain a lot of oil, because as the oil goes in on top of the air, it's going to bubble out. The air is going to push it back out. It has to be displaced. So yeah, that might be something that might need to be looked at there. Wes Silver says, what gear should you be in when pulling the lower unit? For most outboards, neutral. For pretty much every outboard, you take it off in neutral. There's not really, you don't put it in gear. It's not like certain inboards that have to be in forward gear or whatever to, take them out and put them back in without messing up, the stuff. Outboards, you put them in neutral and you drop them. Not much to that one. Simon Adventon says, I want to use a Life BO4 for the electric trolling motor and other electric stuff on my bass tracker. Could I still use the old 2-bank battery 12-volt charger? I have another lead acid battery just for the 40 horsepower 2-stroke Evinrude motor. Totally depends on your battery charging system. Tons of people do have hybrid systems where you're charging a lithium battery and you've got a lead acid battery for your engine and house battery and all that stuff. And if I'm guessing, since you got a 40 horsepower engine, your trolling motor is most likely 12 volt. You didn't say if it was a 24 volt. I'm guessing you got a 12 volt trolling motor. So, 12 volt, boom, you're good to go. Everything's 12 volts. But in order to charge that engine, charge that battery from your engine, you need to have what's called an on-the-run charger, which is a charger. It's basically a DC to DC charger or converter or whatever that takes that charging power coming from the engine to charge that lithium. Just like if you got a regular charger, though, if you're saying that you got a battery charger in your boat that was charging 2 batteries and you changed one out to a lithium, as long as that battery charger it has the capability to charge a lithium battery, then it'll work. But if it doesn't, a lot of older battery chargers, they're just a straight charger. You turn them on, it puts out voltage, and boom, it charges it. Which there can be an issue with the BMSs on the lithium, the battery management systems that are built into the lithium batteries, where it won't just accept charge voltage. And the charger won't sense that there's a battery because the BMS isn't on, and the charger, if it senses it doesn't sense a battery, it's not going to charge the battery. So there are some, I guess you would call it, some integration issues that might be a problem there, because if your charger doesn't have that capability, some chargers do. I mean, some of them you put, there's a lithium battery, boom, boom, and it's already set up like that, but some won't. So can you use your old 2-bank battery 12-volt charger? Possibly, but possibly not. I mean, it depends on the charger. There's thousands of chargers out there. I can't really tell you, but yeah, if you're trying to charge the trolling battery from your engine, you're going to need that on-the-run charger to do that. Randy Osborne says, for me, trim tab setting is also important, talking about fuel economy and whether or not trim tabs will increase or decrease. They can, it totally depends on how the setup is and what's going on with the boat and everything, because trim tabs can increase your fuel economy, but at the same time, they can drastically decrease your fuel economy based on the way your boat is. Some trim tabs will get the boat to ride better and to get more air under the boat, which gives you less drag, which increases your fuel economy. But you can also have trim tabs where you put them down and it creates drag on the boat. So, if you think about a boat and you put trim tabs down in the back, it pushes the boat down into the water, and that creates more drag, more resistance. It decreases your fuel economy. So your trim tab setting can be very, very important on whether you're consuming more fuel or you're saving on your fuel economy. I know Zipwags and what's the Seakeeper Ride or whatever they are, the Seakeeper Rides, those those different ones that are active, those tend to increase fuel economy because they're active. They're not, they have settings where you can set them, and it's shown that sometimes they increase fuel economy, but at the same time, if you think about what you're doing, you're putting something down into the water, which creates drag. Drag robs your fuel economy. So the settings of those trim tabs most definitely make a big impact on whether or not you're saving money or losing money on your fuel economy. Stone Inc. says he is at a 34-foot venture. If so, what year? I've been wanting to throw 400s on my 99 hull, 34-foot, but heard tons of mixed info on putting the 400s on it. I don't really know what kind of mixed info you're getting. The 34 Dowson 1999 34 venture, so same boat. And it performs great with the 300s, with the 400s, with the 350s. The thing about the 34 Venture, though, is it's a very heavy boat. It's like 14,000 pounds, something like that. It's a heavy boat. And a lot of older boats, those 90s, early 2000s, those bigger 34s, 32s, Those offshore fishing boats, they're heavy. Every boat has a hull speed is what I'm trying to say. A hull speed is basically the max hull speed that you're going to get out of that boat. So it doesn't matter if you put, 10,000 horsepower on the back of the boat's only going to get however much that hull speed is based on the design of the boat. With the drag and the way the boat handles the water, you have a hull speed. I don't know about the mixed information that you're getting with the 400s, but it performs great. I mean, the more horsepower allows you to have more control at idle, slow speeds. It can increase your trolling, your fuel economy at your cruising speeds and stuff like that. So, like, depending on your propellers play a massive factor in this, because even if you put a 400 on there, if you got the wrong props, it's just like having a set of 300s on there because you didn't change the prop. You need the right props to even use the horsepower that you're putting on there. Transom factor, that can play a factor. But on that boat, I mean, the 400s, they're doing great. I mean, the boat's only like a 50-mile-an-hour boat. And it also depends on how you load it up. Probably max speed's more like 47, 40, high 40s, depending on how much the boat is loaded. But the boat has a cruising speed of like 35, somewhere in there, usually spinning about 400 to 4,500 RPM. Depends on current wind, all that kind of stuff. Depend on your trim too, but fuel burn, usually around 15, 16 gallons an hour per engine. Again, depending on how fast you're going, 35, 40 miles an hour. But yeah, I think the 400s do great on that boat. Just remember it, weight and the horsepower and the propping. Like, if you don't change your props, then you're not going to get the performance or take advantage of the horsepower that you're putting on the back of the boat. But I don't really know why the 400s would be a problem. It's a 34-foot boat that weighs 14,000 pounds. So, honestly, I would like to see that 34 Venture with a set of V10s on it. Personally, that's what I would like to see, how the boat performs with a set of V10s. That's what I'd be looking at, is 400 V10s and see how that thing handles then. MJ8 says, why not just pull the carrier out and do it right? You can inspect the gear set while you're in there. This is talking about doing propeller shaft seals on lower units. So when you see comments like this, most of the time, this is someone that only deals with fresh water. So you're saying, to pull a bearing carrier out of a gear case used in salt water after 8-10 years, it isn't like you just pull that carrier out. The carriers don't just come out. You ain't pulling the carrier out so you can do your prop shaft seals. It could be a big pain, especially on the older lower units. If you got a 15-year-old lower unit that has been in salt water for 15 years and has, say, 1,500 hours on it, like, you're not just pulling that carrier out to change your prop shaft seals. So if you own this boat and you take it in and you got a prop shaft seal leaking, and the person that's working on it says, hey, I can change your prop shaft seals. Your seals are $30 for the two of them that need to be replaced. And I can take them out. Just taking them out, it's going to take me maybe 30 minutes to replace them. Going to cost you $150. Or they say, well, the right way is to take the carrier out of the lower unit, but in order for me to do that, I'm going to have to get out the torch. I'm going to have to drill out your spanner nut. That's going to take me an hour to get that drilled out and popped out and all cleaned up with all the metal shavings and everything. And then also I got to get the slide hammer out and the puller out to hook into the carrier. And hopefully that comes out. That's going to probably take another hour to do that. And then once I get it out, we're going to need new O-rings. We're going to need new seals for that. And then also the ring around the thing that was broken, so I had to take that out too. Had to heat up the gear case, so now your paint's all messed up on the gear case. And all in all, it's going to take maybe 6 hours to do. It's going to cost you $1,200 to change these prop shaft seals. No one's doing that. That's the problem, is in saltwater versus freshwater, completely different things. So whenever you see someone, why not just pull the carrier out and do it right? Generally, that's because someone wants to change their prop shaft seals, fix their problem, and it only costs them $100, or spend $1,500 and accomplish the same thing, just getting more stuff done. So kind of the issue with saltwater is, I think there's a lot of people out there that has never dealt with saltwater. So like you don't have anything to compare it to, because you've just never had to experience that whenever you got to get a torch out to pull stuff apart. And when it's not your stuff, no one wants to pay for that. Adam Kane says, would love to see how you would replace the gas tank in a boat like this, since it's a 2-piece boat. So this is talking about a 17 Key West, or basically any boat that has a molded floor. So if you've got molded gel coat for your deck, or molded non-skid, which is usually there's going to have designs in it. So you're going to have like strips that are like smooth fiberglass, and then you're going to have patches of molded non-skid in the gel coat or in your deck. These are a big problem. They are very, very expensive to mess with, because you have to de-rig the whole boat, pull the center console, and then you got to cut the floor out. Because you've got molded non-skid in the boat, there's not like you can just cut them out and re-glass that, because it's molded gel coat. So it's a big problem. It's a big task. You basically have to redo the deck in order to either, get that molded pattern back, or redo a molded, pattern, or you got to cover it up with C-deck or something like that, or you have to grind the whole deck down and then just do a non-skid, the sand on stuff. So very, very expensive. It sucks to have to do that. I mean, older boats with molded floors like that, the 2-piece. And when he says 2-piece, all you're saying is that you got the hull of the boat that was built, and then you have the cap of the boat that was separate, and basically everything was rigged and put together, and then the cap is put down on the top and screwed in. So it's like, everything that's under the deck is all like, it's underneath there. It's a 2-piece hull and a cap and a hull. So yeah, those can be a pain for sure. Last question is going to be from Kevin. Says, my 2006 1720, also a Key West, has the same issue with the live well. Might try the same thing. Usually I just hit the bilge pump before the auto float switch engages. Shouldn't have to do that though. Any thoughts about the sealer and live bait? It won't affect them? ? So this is talking about live wells. A lot of live wells, sometimes in the factory, they don't get molded properly or all the way, and they will leak at the top. So as you fill them up, sometimes the drain isn't all, depending on the level. So you got a live well with a drain, a little pipe that comes up with the top, so it allows water to go down, and it keeps the level regulated inside the live well. Now, you can get fish stuck in there, you can get minnows, you can get whatever stuck in there to where it doesn't drain properly. The thing fills up, or it'll fill up and leak out over the top, depending on the type of live well that you have. And it can cause you problems. It can leak down in the bilge. That's what we're talking about here. And so just sealing that, most sealants aren't like, once they're dry, they're dry. Most sealants have like no oil, no residue, no nothing, because once they're done, a lot of them can be sanded and painted. So not that you would want to paint sealant, but they most of them claim can be sanded once they dry. So there's nothing like, left over as far as like a residue, because the concern here is getting residue in the oil. You fill the live well up, and now all of a sudden you got some kind of residue in there that's going to kill the bait, which if you clean your live well with bleach or heavy cleaners, like that's kind of an issue that once you clean it, you need to rinse it out really, really good, because that will leave a residue behind. And then when you fill it up, now all of a sudden you got bleach water, and your bait's going to be dead because you got bleach water in there. So that is something to consider. That's a good comment. But as far as the sealant being a problem, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think you're going to be fine. No issues, nothing to really like be concerned about, like it killing the bait. But the cleaners that you use in the live well, that is something to make sure you think about before you just go spraying in bleach, wipe it out, and then fill your live well up, throw a bunch of bait in there, and now whenever you get where you're going, all your bait's dead.